Thanksgiving has just ended, so the great change has begun. The colors of autumn, orange, I like orange, yellow and brown are out. Gourds and pumpkins are gone. Pumpkin spice in everything you can eat or even drink has disappeared. Though I wouldn't mind keeping pumpkin donuts all year round. I really like those. And yesterday it was 61 degrees. Now, suddenly we've got blizzard conditions, red and green everywhere you look. Evergreen trees, stockings, strings of lights decorating homes. I've seen them. Peppermint flavored everything has replaced pumpkin spice everything. And once again, you can get eggnog. Is it good eggnog, though? And holiday music is everywhere. I admit I was singing Walking in a Winter Wonderland in my head the other day, just walking to get tea in the kitchen. And I have not even heard the song yet this year. It's already going in my head. So I asked Abigail, now that Thanksgiving is over, what are you looking forward to? And what do you think she said? Christmas. Of course, Christmas. If anyone is like me when I was a kid, they're counting down the days with the hope to find a gift under the Christmas tree. And kids probably count what's coming up next by holidays. At least that's kind of how I remember it, right? Christmas. What comes next? Something the kids do. Usually not New Year's Day. It feels like it's all wiped together with Christmas, like Christmas break covers all the way into New Year. And so they get Valentine's Day, and they're handing out cards with their favorite cartoon characters on them and candy and giving them to their classmates. And then, of course, you think St. Patrick's Day, you better wear green or you're getting pinched. Can you do that anymore? So then Easter, right? Next, fancy clothes, egg hunts, baskets full of candy, but most importantly, Cadbury cream eggs. And of course, 4th of July, fireworks, grilling, summer is halfway over. Halloween, right? Costumes and trick-or-treating, and Thanksgiving, family, turkey, and a favorite side dish, perhaps mashed potatoes, stuffing, rolls, pie, and around it goes again, back to Christmas. Though sometimes I think of the year in terms of sports cycles. I'm sure there's some here like me. It's football season, and someone out there is probably wearing a Chiefs shirt. Maybe, not quite sure. And I know it's football season because I'm hearing the voices of Troy Aikman and Joe Buck, though some don't like that. Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels, and whoever is calling Monday Night Football. I'm not quite sure these days. No more John Gruden. And that ends, right? And then we move into the next season, basketball season. Someone out there is probably wearing something Kansas Jayhawks. Oh, wait, K-State. Both today. Here we are in church. And I will tell you, I still don't know what Rock Chalk Jayhawk means. Do you? Yeah. And so we get, right, March Madness, a few games in April. And then there's the NBA playoffs, the only time I tend to watch the NBA. So I've seen a lot of LeBron James since 2010, every single year. And then what comes around, baseball season is next, right? I'll probably see a lot of Kansas City Royals gear when it gets warm again. 162 games in a season, and then the playoffs. And then it resets, and we're back at football. You see, I'm not a hockey fan. And we think of time by major events in our own lives, right? From birth to death. I keep measuring my life by how many times this earth goes around the sun every year, so I'm 33 times around the sun so far. And we count them until we die. Or we count by phases, babies, toddler, childhood, high school, maybe college, maybe marriage, maybe kids, maybe a midlife crisis, hopefully not, and hopefully retirement. Amen. or the daily routine. If you're not thinking about it already, breakfast, lunch, what's next, what's coming next, and dinner. There are so many ways that we count time. Seasons, calendars, sports, major events, phases in our lives, and they all organize and bring order to our lives each year. And in all this, and I think we tend to think of time like a straight line. Have you ever heard of a timeline? The past is back there, that dot, this line back here. I'm right here in the middle in the present, and over the future is over there, this line, this dot over here. But we live in the now, the present. Yet our text today calls us to think of time, and therefore our lives, differently. So in Hebrews 9:26, I'll read from half of 26 on. But he has appeared once for all at the culmination of the ages, to do away with sin by the sacrifice of himself, just as people are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment. So Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many, and he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. We are called first to live within the works of Jesus Christ, not a timeline, a calendar, a season, but we're called to live within Jesus' first coming in the past and his second coming in the future. So how we might think about it, we have like timelines where we usually organize things, right? Past, present, future. And we may insert Jesus somewhere into that timeline, a spot, maybe somewhere in the past, like a conversion story, something like, I accepted Jesus and was baptized when I was 17 years old. And so that event happened. It happened in the past, and I remember that baptism. I remember that commitment. But how should we think about it? I think what's really happening is we are being inserted into the timeline or the work of Jesus Christ. We're taking our own timeline, our past, present, future, and we're inserting it into something bigger, the work of Jesus Christ. We read, Christ himself has brought time to its God-intended climax. All of time is around this event. We read, Christ himself will bring the end of time when he appears again at his second coming as well. We have the end of time, the peaks, the key moments. All of time revolves around Christ's work of dealing with sin in the past and bringing salvation in the future. Now, I think that is something worthy of building a life around. That is something worthy of building a calendar around. Because all of time revolves around Christ's work, we're called to think of the now, the present, that dot, as pressed in upon by Christ coming into the world and Christ's second coming. These things pressing in on us together, the past and the future into the present. Why would we do that? Well, two things in our text today. We see the culmination of the ages first was brought about by Christ's sacrifice of himself, and it says, is still at work now. Big emphasis on this. It's still at work now. It may have happened in the past, but there are effects and perfections and things happening right now. This was all that time had been leading to, the incarnation, the cross, resurrection, ascension, and this culmination is said to be achieved by the abolition of sin. Because sin separated us from God and brought with it destruction, fear of death, judgment. Christ's coming, it says, has destroyed sin completely. Christ has done away with sin as principle, as force, as source of pollution, as separation from God. Sin is no longer a force that determines our lives. So we see Christ's actions in the past to defeat sin are still in force, working today, tomorrow, and the future. The second thing here about this is that he says, the end of the ages will be brought by Christ, bringing salvation to those who are waiting for him now. For sin is so well taken care of, it doesn't have to be dealt with at his second coming. He comes to finish this work of salvation. But this, it says, is for those who are waiting for him. So Christ's actions in the future are working backwards on us into the present. See, we have the past finished work of sin being conquered, the future work of Christ bringing salvation to us, and they're both pressing in on us in the present, the in-between. Right? And we're called to live in that in-between. How then should we live in this victory over sin and the coming of salvation? So we live in a culture of death and sin denial. I think it's pretty clear. We don't want to talk about death, and we don't want to talk about sin, because then we'd have to think about it. Then we'd actually have to deal with it. When people are given a death sentence, it seems they tend to be deeply affected. Things come into focus. We start thinking about what's important in life. What do we want to accomplish? We want our lives to mean something. We want to do something important. People say, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that with my time. In a way, in a sense, it's strange, though, because we all know that's going to happen. Alan said to me, once we're born, we come out of the womb with a death certificate. We know it's coming down the pipeline. In fact, you can take a genetic test now, and you can learn if you have like a terrible disease in your genes that hasn't surfaced yet in your future. The ancestry thing. And that you can do this for your whole genome sequence. So it's an ethical issue for some. You don't want the test because you don't want the knowledge of a timeline of a possible disease and death you might have, and because that would really give you anxiety, and you'd change the way you live because of this knowledge. As some people say, ignorance is bliss. We don't want to have to deal with the reality. But really, thinking on death changes how you live. What does it say in our text here? Just as people are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment, so Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many, and he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. The future really comes into the present and impacts how you live. And we are afraid of death, and we don't want to talk about it because death comes from sin, and death means the coming judgment, and that comes because of sin too. So it's this whole thing together. So where does that leave us? Well, we're all going to die. Sorry. We can't escape it. But we know that the power of sin has been defeated by Christ for all time. Christ has done everything that was necessary so that we know we are forgiven. So I say, lean into the work Christ has done for you to set you free. We're all going to face judgment. Sorry. We're going to face it. We can't escape it. But Christ is bringing salvation to those who eagerly wait for him. Christ has done everything so that we can confidently look toward completing the journey to salvation. So I say, lean into the salvation Christ has prepared for you. If our timelines, we've been talking about how we keep track of time, are placed within the work of Christ, not Christ in ours, but we place our lives, our timelines within the works of Jesus. In the past, he conquered sin through death. In the future, he comes to bring us salvation. When we are within the work of Christ, we see the destruction of sin and coming salvation. We are part of a bigger story. We are part of a bigger timeline It says, beginning before the creation of the world and stretching to its end. We see the power of Christ's work in the past to overthrow sin, his work in the future to bring salvation. And that is all at work in us right now, pressing in upon us and changing us. And I'll tell you, that is good news. Amen.